Chef Mi Jin Choi placed the first dish on the table with the reverence of someone presenting a weapon to a general. The kimchi glowed slightly in the hall's dim lighting, the fermentation process still active after 2 years of careful cultivation. "This is kimchi," she announced to the silent Velthari warriors. "Humans discovered that we could take fresh vegetables and let specific bacteria colonies wage war on them for months or years. The winning bacteria produces flavors that most species find lethal." She took a large bite, chewing slowly and visibly enjoying the experience. The sound of her eating echoed in the quiet hall, the crunch of vegetables that had been transformed by millions of microscopic battles. Captain Lee began his story while Mi Jin ate. "War Marshal, you asked to hear of our greatest victories. Let me tell you about the Great Hunger of 2157. During humanity's first attempt at interstellar colonization, the aliens leaned forward, expecting a traditional war story. Our colony ship Endeavor was stranded in deep space for 3 years when our jump drive failed. We had food for 6 months. Most species would have starved or resorted to cannibalism." He paused as Mi Jin prepared the next dish. "Humans did something different. We turned starvation into a cooking challenge." Mi Jin held up a piece of meat that was smoking from its own internal heat. "This bulgogi has been marinated in compounds that would eat through most alien digestive systems. The marinade contains fermented soy that produces alcohol, peppers that create capsaicin levels used in military applications, and garlic that generates sulfur compounds toxic to most life forms." She placed the meat on the grill, and the temperature display showed readings that made several Velthari check their heat sensors. The meat began searing immediately, producing smoke that smelled like controlled explosions. "During those 3 years," Captain Lee continued, "we ate everything on that ship that could theoretically be digested. Leather, insulation, cleaning supplies mixed with water to make soup. We took materials that should have killed us and found ways to make them nutritious." Battle leader Vex Kari interrupted. "That is survival, not victory." Captain Lee smiled. "The victory came when we realized we enjoyed the challenge. By year 2, we weren't just trying to stay alive. We were competing to see who could create the most creative meal from ship components. We turned desperation into entertainment." Dr. Park added scientific commentary as Mi Jin worked. "This meat comes from cattle that we didn't just hunt or even domesticate. We redesigned them. Over thousands of years, we bred them specifically to be delicious when cooked with methods that would destroy most organic matter." The bulgogi was ready, and Mi Jin served it onto plates that had been heated to temperatures that glowed faintly red. The meat is served at temperatures that would cause immediate burns to most species. Humans eat it this hot because the heat is part of the flavor. She took a large bite of meat that was still sizzling. Steam rose from her mouth as she chewed, but her expression showed only satisfaction. Sub-Marshal Krex Noth stared in disbelief. "That food is literally burning your mouth." "Only a little," Mi Jin replied. "Good Korean barbecue should challenge every part of your digestive system. If it doesn't make you sweat, you're not eating it right." Jinho served the next course, rice that had been prepared with techniques that bordered on alchemy. This rice was grown in paddies that flood and drain on precise schedules. The water contains minerals that would be poisonous to most species, but they create complex flavors when the rice absorbs them. Captain Lee continued his narrative. "When the rescue ship finally found us, they expected to discover either corpses or broken survivors. Instead, they found a crew that had gained weight during the emergency. We had turned our crisis into the longest dinner party in human history. The next side dish was the pickled radish, and when Jinho opened the container, the vinegar fumes made several aliens step backward. The acetic acid content was high enough to be used as an industrial solvent. This has been fermenting in acid strong enough to clean starship components," he explained casually. "The fermentation process creates flavor compounds that exist nowhere else in nature. Humans developed a taste for controlled chemical burns thousands of years ago." War Marshal Kixthara was no longer looking amused. "You eat acid?" "Diluted acid," Dr. Park corrected, "along with alcohol, toxins, alkaloids, and various organic compounds that most species classify as hazardous materials. Human cuisine is basically applied chemistry, with an emphasis on controlled poisoning." Mi Jin served the final meat course, pork belly that had been prepared using techniques that resembled metallurgy more than cooking. The meat had been subjected to multiple heating and cooling cycles that broke down proteins in ways that shouldn't occur in nature. This pig was fed a diet of fermented foods that would Hospitalize most aliens, she explained. The fermentation in the pig system created marbling patterns that enhance flavor when exposed to extreme heat. We then cooked it using temperature cycles that simulate the interior of a blast furnace. Captain Lee's story reached its climax. The rescue crew asked us how we had survived. Our captain told them something that became famous throughout human space. We didn't survive. We thrived. Humans don't just adapt to hostile conditions. We find ways to enjoy them. The final course was the most shocking of all. Mijin produced a bottle of liquid that glowed faintly and required protective handling equipment. This is soju that has been distilled to 95% alcohol content and infused with capsaicin extract, she announced. It's technically classified as both a beverage and a chemical weapon by galactic standards. She poured small amounts into glasses that had been chilled to prevent immediate evaporation. The liquid continued to glow as she served it. In human culture, this is how we end a feast. We consume something that should kill us, and we do it together as a sign of trust and friendship. The three humans raised their glasses. The liquid inside was viscous enough that it didn't pour like normal alcohol. It moved like concentrated poison. To survival, Captain Lee said. To adaptation, Dr. Park added. To making the impossible delicious, Mijin concluded. They drank the entire contents of their glasses without flinching. The Velthari warriors watched in absolute silence as the humans consumed something that would have shut down most alien nervous systems instantly. After a moment, Mijin spoke to the assembled aliens. War Marshal, you wanted to know what Deathworld warriors eat. This is our answer. We eat everything that tries to kill us, and we make it taste good. Captain Lee stood and addressed the crowd. You celebrate conquest by consuming your enemies. We celebrate survival by consuming our challenges. You eat to show dominance. We eat to show that nothing can dominate us. Every dish we've served tonight contains something that evolved specifically to be toxic to other creatures. We took those toxins and turned them into flavors. We took bacteria that cause disease and turned them into fermentation. We took plants that burn and animals that fight back, and we made them into a meal we share with friends. Dr. Park provided the scientific conclusion. Your feast showed us how you treat your enemies. Our feast shows you how we treat our entire planet. Earth spent 4 billion years trying to kill us with diseases, poisons, predators, and natural disasters. We survived all of that and decided to eat it for dinner. The hall was completely silent. The Velthari warriors, who had spent hours celebrating cruelty and conquest, were staring at beings who had turned their own survival into an art form. War Marshal Kixithara finally found her voice. You eat poison for entertainment? We eat everything for entertainment, Mijin replied. Poison, fire, acid, bacteria, alcohol that could fuel starships. If it exists, humans have probably found a way to make it delicious. But why? Vexkari asked, her voice barely a whisper. Captain Lee smiled. Because we can, and because it's fun. The revelation was complete. The aliens had expected to intimidate creatures they saw as weak. Instead, they had discovered predators who didn't need to conquer other species because they had already conquered everything that had ever threatened them. The human feast was over, but its impact was just beginning. Commander Hyunwoo Kim stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the stars through the main screen. 3 months had passed since humans first met aliens from the Galactic Alliance. Everything had changed since then. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. A soft beep came from the communication station. Commander, called Lieutenant Taemin Park, we're getting a message from the Velthari Empire. It's marked as urgent. Hyunwoo walked over to the station. The Velthari were one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy. They looked like giant lizards and fought in wars across many star systems. Most other alien races stayed away from them. Put it on screen, Hyunwoo said. The screen flickered and a huge reptilian face appeared. Scars covered the creature's dark green scales. Red eyes stared at them with cold intelligence. This was War Marshal Kixithara, leader of the Velthari 5th Battle Fleet. Humans. The alien's voice was deep and harsh. I am Kixithara. Your species claims to be warriors from a death world. We find this amusing. Hyunwoo kept his face calm. He had studied the files about Velthari culture. They respected only strength and despised weakness. War Marshal, what can we do for you? The alien's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. We challenge you to prove your worth. In 7 days, you will come to our homeworld of Kethmore. There we will hold a victory feast. Your warriors will eat with our warriors. We will see if humans are truly strong, or if you are just soft creatures who got lucky." The transmission ended before Hyunwoo could reply. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. If humans failed this test, other alien races would never take them seriously. Earth's position in galactic politics would be finished. Dr. So-Young Park entered the bridge a few minutes later. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms. "Commander, I heard about the message. This is very dangerous. Tell me about these victory feasts," Hyunwoo said. So-Young pulled up files on her datapad. "Velthari victory feasts are ancient rituals. Warriors sit together and eat the flesh of their enemies while telling stories of their greatest battles. The food is usually disturbing. They eat creatures they've killed in combat, sometimes while the meat is still moving." She showed him pictures from old Alliance reports. Velthari warriors tearing into raw meat with their claws and teeth. Tables covered with body parts from different alien species. They do this to show dominance. Any species that can't stomach their feast is marked as weak. Weak species either become slaves or get destroyed. Hyunwoo studied the images. "What happens if we refuse?" "The Velthari will spread word that humans are cowards. No other Alliance race will trust us or trade with us. We'll be cut off from galactic civilization." So-Young's voice was worried. "But if we go and fail, it might be worse. They could declare war on Earth." The commander thought for a long moment. Earth had fought hard to get this far. After first contact, human diplomats had worked day and night to get a seat at the galactic table. They couldn't give up now. "We're going," Hyunwoo decided. "Get Captain Dong-hyun Lee up here. And contact Chef Mi-jin Choi in the kitchen." An hour later, the three key people sat in the conference room. Captain Lee was the ship's best combat officer. He had fought in the border wars and earned respect from every soldier under his command. Chef Choi ran the ship's food service and had worked in military kitchens for 15 years. "So let me understand this," Captain Lee said after hearing the situation. "These lizard people want to have dinner with us, and if we don't eat their gross food, Earth becomes a target?" "That's about right," Hyunwoo nodded. Chef Choi leaned forward. "What kind of food do they usually serve?" So-Young showed them the files. Raw meat from defeated enemies. Body parts from sentient beings. Sometimes they eat creatures while they're still alive. It's meant to be as brutal and disturbing as possible. The chef studied the images without flinching. She had served in war zones and seen terrible things. "I've cooked and eaten some strange stuff during my military service. But this is different. They're not just eating for survival. They're making a statement. Can you handle it?" Hyunwoo asked. "I think so. But Commander, we need to make our own statement too. If we just sit there and try to choke down their food, we'll look weak no matter what. We need to bring something that shows them what humans are really like." Captain Lee smiled. "What did you have in mind?" "Korean barbecue," Mi-jin said simply. "Real Korean barbecue with all the traditional sides. Kimchi that's been fermenting for months. Gochujang so spicy it burns your mouth. Meat grilled so hot it's practically on fire." So-Young looked confused. "How is that going to impress alien warriors?" Mi-jin's eyes got a distant look. "Doctor, you said these aliens want to see what makes humans strong, right? Well, our strength doesn't come from eating our enemies. It comes from eating food that should kill us and enjoying every bite." She stood up and started pacing. "Think about it. Humans are the only species that deliberately makes food painful to eat. We add chemicals that burn our mouths. We ferment things until they're barely controlled rot. We eat plants and animals that evolved specifically to be toxic to other creatures." "She's right," Captain Lee said, understanding dawning on his face. "Every other species in the galaxy eats for nutrition or dominance. Humans eat for fun, even when it hurts." Hyunwoo was starting to see the plan. "You want to show them that humans don't just survive dangerous things. We turn dangerous things into entertainment." "Exactly," Mi-jin nodded. "Let them eat their raw enemy meat and try to scare us. We'll eat food that's literally made of controlled poison and ask for seconds. We'll show them what a real Deathworld species looks like." The meeting continued for 2 more hours as they planned every detail. They would take a small team to Kethmore. Captain Lee to represent military strength, Dr. Park to study the aliens, and Chef Choi to prepare humanity's answer to the Velthari challenge. As they prepared to leave, Hyunwoo felt a mix of worry and pride. Humanity was about to face one of the galaxy's most dangerous species in a contest that could determine Earth's future, but they wouldn't face it as victims or beggars. They would face it as what they truly were, a species that had learned to thrive on a world that spent millions of years trying to kill them. The Velthari wanted to see what Deathworld warriors looked like. They were about to find out. War Marshal Kix Thara stood at the head of the Velthari table and raised a goblet filled with dark liquid. The hundreds of warriors in the hall fell silent, waiting for their leader to begin the ancient ritual. Warriors, her voice echoed off the metal walls. Tonight we feast as our ancestors did. We consume the flesh of our enemies and remember the victories that made our empire strong. The crowd roared in response. Captain Lee, Dr. Park, and Chef Choi watched from their table as alien servants brought out the first course. What they saw made even these experienced humans pause. The platters contained chunks of raw meat that were still moving. The flesh twitched and writhed as if the creatures had been killed only moments before. Some pieces had tentacles that continued to curl and uncurl. Others had what looked like eyes that hadn't yet gone dark. The first course, announced Sub-Marshal Krexnoth, comes from the rebel leaders of Proxima 7. We defeated their army last month and brought back the choicest cuts. He picked up a piece of purple flesh with his claws and bit into it. Dark fluid ran down his chin as he chewed. The taste of defeat is always sweet, he said, prompting more cheers from the watching warriors. Dr. Park was taking careful notes, but her hand shook slightly as she wrote. These weren't just battle trophies. The Velthari were literally eating their enemies. The creatures on the plates might have been intelligent beings with families and dreams, now reduced to nothing but food for their conquerors. Battle leader Vexikari stood next. She selected a piece of meat that looked almost human in shape. This morsel comes from a Terran colony ship we intercepted near the outer rim. The colonists thought they could establish a settlement in our territory without permission. She tore into the flesh with her teeth, making wet sounds as she ate. They begged for mercy in 17 different languages. I made sure they understood their mistake in all 17 before I killed them. The Velthari warriors banged their weapons on the tables in approval. Several of them began their own stories while eating similar dishes. Captain Lee listened to each tale, his face showing no emotion, but his hands clenched into fists under the table. One warrior described how he had hunted down refugee ships fleeing a war zone. Another told of executing prisoners after they had surrendered. A third bragged about destroying a hospital ship because it was treating enemy wounded. Each story was accompanied by the consumption of some part of the victims. Hearts, brains, limbs, nothing was too sacred or too disturbing for the Velthari feast. They didn't just eat their enemies. They celebrated the cruelty of their deaths. War Marshal Kix Thara produced a skull goblet filled with what she claimed was blood from a defeated admiral. This one thought he was clever, she said before drinking deeply. He tried to hide his fleet in a nebula. I found them anyway and made sure he watched as I destroyed every ship under his command before I killed him. The second course was even worse. Live creatures were brought out in transparent containers. Some looked like insects, others resembled small mammals. All of them were clearly terrified and trying to escape their prisons. Fresh prey, announced Krexnoth as he opened one container. Caught on our last raid. The fear makes the meat taste better. He pulled out a creature that looked almost like a rabbit but with silver fur and large blue eyes. It made soft crying sounds as he held it up for the crowd to see. Then without any ceremony he bit off its head. Chef Choi had seen terrible things during her military service, but this was different. This wasn't war or survival. This was deliberate cruelty performed as entertainment. She forced herself to watch, knowing that any sign of weakness would doom humanity's chances. Battle leader Vexikari noticed the humans' reactions. You seem quiet, Deathworlders. Are you not impressed by our feast? Perhaps your stomachs are too weak for true warrior food. Captain Lee finally spoke. We're observing your customs with great interest, battle leader. Please continue. Observing, she repeated mockingly. Yes, that's what prey species do. They observe while predators act. The third course consisted of fermented organs from various alien species. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of decay and chemicals that made even some of the Velthari warriors wrinkle their nostrils. But they ate it anyway, describing each dish in gruesome detail. Dr. Park realized that this wasn't just about food. The entire ritual was designed to break the spirit of anyone watching. The Velthari wanted their guests to flee in terror or beg for mercy. Either reaction would prove that humans were weak and unworthy of respect. War Marshal Kix Thara saved the worst for last. She ordered her servants to bring out a sealed container that required 3 warriors to carry. When they opened it, the smell that emerged made several humans in the audience cover their faces. Inside was a creature that might have once been intelligent. Its body had been kept alive through artificial means while pieces were cut away for previous meals. It looked at the assembled crowd with eyes that still held awareness and pain. This one, the war marshal explained, was a peace negotiator who tried to convince us to spare a civilian population. We've been keeping it fresh for special occasions. Each bite reminds us why mercy is weakness. She cut away a piece of flesh while the creature was still conscious. Its scream echoed through the hall as the Velthari warriors cheered. Many of them began similar stories about torture, slavery, and genocide, each one trying to outdo the others in their cruelty. The display went on for 2 more hours. Every course was more disturbing than the last. Every story celebrated death, suffering, and conquest. The Velthari weren't just trying to intimidate the humans. They were showing their fundamental philosophy that might made right, and that cruelty was a virtue. Through it all, the human delegation sat in silence. They didn't flee, didn't beg, didn't show the fear that the aliens expected. They simply watched and waited, their faces calm and unreadable. Finally, War Marshal Kixthera stood and addressed them directly. Well, humans, you have seen how true warriors feast. You have heard how real predators celebrate victory. Now it is your turn. She gestured toward their empty table with mockery in her voice. Show us what weaklings from your pathetic world consider a feast. Amuse us with your civilized meal before we decide whether your species deserves to exist in our galaxy. The hall erupted in laughter and jeers. Velthari warriors shouted insults and challenges at the human delegation. Many of them were already drunk on fermented blood and alien alcohol. They expected to see the humans produce some pitiful meal of processed rations that would confirm everything the aliens believed about their weakness. Captain Lee stood slowly and walked toward the kitchen area where Chef Choi was waiting. The crowd quieted, eager to see the humans humiliate themselves. Are you ready, Chef? He asked quietly. Mi-jin Choi looked at him with eyes that had seen the worst that sentient beings could do to each other. Captain, I've watched these monsters celebrate cruelty for hours. Now they're about to learn something about humans that they should have researched before they invited us here. What's that? We don't eat our enemies because we have to, she said as she began unpacking her equipment. We eat things that are actively trying to kill us because we find it entertaining. And we've had millions of years to perfect the art. The real feast was about to begin. The human shuttle dropped out of hyperspace near Kethmore, and Captain Dong Hyun Lee got his first look at the Velthari homeworld. The planet looked like a giant ball of rust and metal. Red deserts covered most of the surface, broken up by massive cities that looked more like fortresses than places where people lived. Cheerful place, muttered Dr. So-Young Park as she studied the sensor readings. High gravity, thin atmosphere, and surface temperatures that would cook most life forms. No wonder they're such tough fighters. Chef Mi-jin Choi was checking her equipment one last time. She had packed everything she needed for the feast, but the gravity on Kethmore was twice as strong as Earth's. Everything would be harder to do. At least the heat will help with the cooking, she said, trying to stay positive. Their shuttle was guided to a landing platform in the capital city. As soon as they stepped out, the heat hit them like a wall. Even with their environmental suits, they could feel the hostile nature of this world. The air smelled like metal and sulfur. A group of Velthari warriors waited for them on the platform. The aliens were even bigger than the humans had expected. The smallest one was 7 feet tall, and their leader stood over 8 feet. Their scales were thick and scarred from countless battles. Cybernetic implants replaced damaged body parts on several of them. War Marshal Kixthera stepped forward. Up close, she was terrifying. Her scales were dark green with black stripes. Old scars crossed her face and arms. One of her eyes had been replaced with a red cybernetic implant that glowed in the dim light. So, she said in her harsh voice, the soft humans have actually come. I admit I expected you to find some excuse to avoid this challenge. Captain Lee stepped forward and gave a respectful bow. He had studied Velthari customs during the journey. War Marshal Kixthera, we are honored by your invitation. Humans do not run from challenges. The alien leader made a sound that might have been laughter. We shall see. Allow me to introduce my finest warriors. She gestured to a massive male with cybernetic arms. This is Submarshal Krexnoth. He has conquered 12 worlds for our empire. Krexnoth studied the humans with yellow eyes. I have heard stories about your species. They say you come from a death world, but you look small and weak. Your skin has no scales or armor. How do you survive? We adapt, Captain Lee replied simply. The War Marshal pointed to another alien, this one female with silver markings on her scales. And this is Battle Leader Vexkari. She single-handedly killed a space leviathan during the siege of Krotos Prime. Vexkari looked at the humans like she was deciding which one to eat first. I have studied your military records, humans. You fight with machines and weapons from a distance. Do you even know what real combat feels like? Dr. Park spoke up. Battle Leader, humans have been in constant combat for our entire evolution. Every day on Earth was a fight to survive. Survival and conquest are different things, Vexkari replied. Today you will learn the difference. The Velthari led them through the city streets. The buildings were all made of metal and stone, designed to withstand attacks. Weapon shops and training grounds were everywhere. Young Velthari practiced with swords and claws in open courtyards. The whole city felt like one giant military base. They passed groups of alien civilians who stopped to stare at the humans. Most looked curious, but some showed clear hostility. A few made gestures that the translation devices couldn't interpret, but their meaning was clear enough. Your people seem excited about tonight, Captain Lee observed. War Marshal Kixithara's mouth opened in her version of a smile. Word has spread that we are testing the new species tonight. Many have come to watch. Victory feasts are rare entertainment. Usually we only hold them after great military victories. And if we fail your test, Dr. Park asked, then your species will be marked as prey rather than predators. Krexnoth answered. Prey species have their uses in the galaxy, but they are not treated as equals. They arrived at the Grand War Hall, a massive building that dominated the city center. The architecture was brutal and impressive. Statues of Velthari warriors lined the entrance, each one holding the severed head of some defeated enemy. The doors were made from the hull plates of destroyed starships. Inside, the hall was even more intimidating. The walls were covered with weapons, skulls, and battle trophies from across the galaxy. Hundreds of Velthari warriors filled the seats, all of them watching the human delegation with predatory interest. The center of the hall contained 2 long tables. One was already set with Velthari dishes that looked disturbing even from a distance. The other table was empty, waiting for the human contribution to the feast. Impressive, Chef Choi whispered as she studied the room. They really know how to set a mood. Battle Leader Vexkari overheard her. You seem calm for someone about to face their first victory feast. Are you not afraid? Mijin looked up at the towering alien warrior. Battle Leader, I've cooked meals during artillery bombardments. I've prepared food while ships were burning around me. Fear doesn't help when you have a job to do. The alien's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Perhaps humans are not as soft as they appear. War Marshal Kixthera called for attention. Her voice boomed across the hall without any electronic amplification. Warriors of the Velthari Empire, tonight we test a new species. The humans claim to be warriors from a death world. We shall see if they are worthy of respect, or if they are merely another weak race seeking our protection. The crowd responded with roars and cheers. Some warriors banged their weapons against the tables. The noise was deafening. The rules are ancient and simple, the War Marshal continued. Each species will present their traditional feast while sharing tales of their greatest victories. We will eat as warriors eat. We will speak as warriors speak. By the end of this night, we will know what these humans truly are. She turned to face the human delegation. We shall begin, as is proper. You will observe how true warriors celebrate victory. Then you may try to match our display if you dare. Captain Lee stepped forward. War Marshal, we accept your challenge. But I should warn you, human celebrations can be intense. Several Velthari warriors laughed at this. One shouted, We shall see how intense your species can be when faced with real warrior food. Dr. Park was already taking notes on her datapad. The social dynamics were fascinating from an anthropological perspective, even if they were potentially deadly from a political one. Chef Choi was studying the kitchen facilities they had been given. The equipment was basic but functional. More importantly, the Velthari had allowed her to bring all of her ingredients and tools. They clearly had no idea what they were about to experience. Are you ready for this? Captain Lee asked her quietly. Mijin smiled as she unpacked the first of her supplies. Captain, I've been preparing for this my whole career. These aliens think they know what dangerous food looks like. They're about to learn that humans don't just eat to survive or dominate. We eat for the pure joy of conquering something that's trying to kill us. The War Marshal raised her clawed hand for silence. Let the victory feast begin. Warriors of Velthar, show these soft-worlders what real predators consume. The alien warriors roared their approval as the first course was brought out. Captain Lee and his team took their seats at the observation table, knowing that humanity's future might depend on what happened in the next few hours. The test was about to begin. Chef Mi-jin Choi walked to the kitchen area with Corporal Jin Ho Nam, her assistant. The Velthari warriors watched them with amusement, expecting to see some pathetic display that would prove human weakness, once and for all. What they saw instead made them slowly go quiet. Mi-jin and Jin-ho began unpacking equipment that looked more like military hardware than cooking tools, industrial-grade heating elements that glowed with contained plasma, pressure vessels that could withstand the force of small explosions, chemical analyzers that belonged in a weapons lab. What are those devices? Battle leader Vexkari asked, her mocking tone becoming uncertain. Cooking equipment, Mi-jin replied casually, as she assembled what looked like a portable reactor. Korean barbecue requires precise temperature control. This grill can reach temperatures that would melt most starship hulls. Sub-Marshal Krexnoth leaned forward. That cannot be for food preparation. It looks like a plasma weapon. Jin-ho looked up from where he was setting up fermentation containers. Sir, humans learned to cook with controlled explosions thousands of years ago. We've been refining the techniques ever since. Dr. Park was running atmospheric tests while the chefs worked. The local air composition is perfect, she announced. High oxygen content will really make the flavors pop. War Marshal Kixathera was starting to look less confident. Flavors? What flavors require such extreme preparation methods? You'll see, Mi-jin said as she began unpacking ingredients. The first container made several Velthari warriors step backward. It contained vegetables that seemed to glow with their own energy. Red peppers so intense that they hurt to look at. Green pods that appeared to be writhing in their storage medium. Those plants are moving, observed one warrior nervously. Carolina Reapers, Mi-jin explained as she handled the peppers with thick protective gloves. They rate about 2 million on the Scoville scale. That's hot enough to use as a chemical weapon. Humans eat them for fun. She opened another container, releasing fumes that made the aliens' eyes water from 30 feet away. And this is gochujang that's been fermenting for 18 months. The bacteria in here produce compounds that would shut down most alien nervous systems in seconds. Jin-ho was setting up the kimchi preparation station. Chef, should I use the 6-month batch or the 2-year batch? 2-year, Mi-jin replied. These warriors want to see what Deathworld food looks like. Let's show them what controlled bacterial warfare tastes like. The smell that emerged when Jin-ho opened the kimchi container was unlike anything the Velthari had experienced. It wasn't just the scent of fermentation. It was the aroma of millions of microorganisms that had been fighting a carefully managed war in a bottle for 2 years. Several aliens actually gagged. One younger warrior ran from the hall. That smell, gasped Vexkarian, it's like a biological weapon. Exactly, Dr. Park said cheerfully. Humans learned to eat food that was essentially rotting thousands of years ago. We turned bacterial infection into a delicacy. Other species throw away food when bacteria starts growing on it. Humans season it and let the bacteria fight it out until only the strongest flavors survive. But the real shock came when Mi-jin began unpacking the meat. The first package contained steaks that were dark red, almost black. The meat had a texture that suggested incredible density and toughness. When she unwrapped it fully, the entire hall went silent. This is from Earth cattle, she explained matter-of-factly. Specifically from cattle we bred for maximum flavor over the course of 10,000 years. These animals were genetically optimized to be delicious, not just nutritious. Krexnoth stared at the meat. You? Bred creatures specifically to eat them? Of course. We didn't just hunt our food sources to extinction like most species. We captured them, studied them, improved them, and then turned them into livestock. This particular cow was raised on a diet that would kill most alien species. The grass it ate contained natural toxins that we specifically cultivated to enhance the meat's flavor. She pulled out another package. And this is from Korean black pigs. We spent centuries breeding them to have exactly the right fat content and muscle density. They're fed on a diet that includes fermented foods that would hospitalize most galactic species. Jinho was setting up a smoking apparatus that looked like it belonged on a battleship. The wood chips are from earth oak trees that grew in soil contaminated with heavy metals. The smoke contains compounds that most species would consider poisonous. You season your food with poison? Asked a warrior from the back of the hall. Everything is poisonous in the right dose, Dr. Park replied. Humans just have a much higher tolerance than most species. What would kill you makes our food interesting. Mi-Jin began preparing the marinade and the chemical analysis equipment started beeping warnings. Perfect, she said, reading the display. pH levels that would dissolve alien stomach lining. Capsaicin concentrations that could be used as riot control agents. And fermentation byproducts that are technically classified as organic solvents. She began mixing ingredients with the casual confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times. Soy sauce that had been fermenting for decades. Garlic that had been engineered to produce maximum allicin, ginger that contained compounds hot enough to use in heating systems. The marinade itself began to smoke when the ingredients combined. The reaction was actually exothermic, producing heat through pure chemical interaction. Is that mixture supposed to be burning? Fexkari asked, backing away from the preparation area. Only a little, Mi-Jin replied. Korean barbecue marinade is supposed to be aggressive. If it's not attacking the meat on a molecular level, you're not doing it right. Captain Lee had been watching the aliens' reactions with growing satisfaction. Their cocky confidence was evaporating, as they realized that humans didn't just eat to survive. They ate for sport. Chef, he called out, why don't you tell our hosts about the banchan? Mi-Jin smiled as she began preparing the side dishes. Banchan are traditional Korean accompaniments. This one is pickled radish that's been soaking in vinegar strong enough to clean starship parts. She opened another container. This is seasoned soybean paste that contains bacteria cultures we've been maintaining for over 1,000 years. The fermentation process produces alcohol levels that would require a license in most systems. Jinho was working on the final side dish. And this is seasoned spinach with sesame oil that's been cold-pressed from seeds grown in volcanic soil. The mineral content would be toxic to most life forms. War Marshal Kixthara was no longer laughing. You eat all of these things together? Every meal, Captain Lee replied. Humans don't just tolerate dangerous food. We seek it out. We spend enormous amounts of time and energy making our food as challenging as possible to consume. But why? Krexnoth asked, genuinely confused. Dr. Park looked up from her notes. Because we can. Earth spent millions of years trying to kill us with poisonous plants, dangerous animals, extreme weather, and hostile environments. We survived all of that. Then we decided to make our survival even harder, just to see if we could. Mi-Jin was now lighting the grill, and the temperature readings made several aliens check their environmental suits. The cooking process is the final test, she explained. We take food that's already dangerous and expose it to temperatures that would vaporize most organic matter. Then we eat it while it's still hot enough to cause tissue damage. You burn your food? Asked a warrior. We char it, corrected Jinho. Controlled burning that creates complex chemical reactions. The carbon compounds produced during the charring process would be considered carcinogenic by most species. Humans consider them delicious. The aliens watched in growing horror as the humans continued their preparation. This wasn't just cooking. It was controlled warfare between humans and their food, with the humans winning by consuming everything that tried to kill them. War Marshal Kixthara finally understood what they were really facing. These weren't weak creatures seeking protection. These were predators who had turned their own survival into an art form. The real demonstration was about to begin.